What's going on, y'all? It's JD Piquel. Welcome into the Hard Count, the People's Show for every single thing that you know and that you love about college football. It happens here on a daily basis. We're so glad you're with us. We are live in living color. We got a lot to get to. It was a scary Saturday, scary hours all over the college football landscape. We got a lot to unpack, but I want to make sure we start this out with a quick PSA. You are joining the party. I know you're watching. We appreciate that. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, but you're joining the party at the end of this thing. So right now, we want you to go ahead and ask your question. We're going to do a Q&A at the end of this deal. It's how you're joining the party. You're going to get involved, and we're going to have Nick Brake, also live in living color, with a camera on his face, having read out your questions. We're going to make sure we involve you that way. So again, submit those now so we have those for the end of the program. All right? Roll party. Like I said, it was a scary Saturday. It was another one of those Saturdays where your friends said, or your so-called friends said, hey, why don't you come out with us to the lake? Hey, why don't you come out to us for brunch? Come hang. It's a sleepy Saturday. There's not that many good games on. You'll be back for Arkansas A&M. And what happened? Yet again, college football Saturday rears its beautiful head and shows you that you cannot take a Saturday off. USC got pushed to the limit for all of you that stayed up to watch that game. Miami had Middle Tennessee come into town and just do pretty much what they wanted. Oklahoma, they go down with Kansas State coming to Norman. Adrian Martinez, an early Heisman bid, question mark. Probably another show for another time. We're going to start this program off talking about Oklahoma and Kansas State, talking about Texas going down to continue with the scary hour Saturday theme. We're going to talk about Clemson being pushed to overtime. We're going to talk about Auburn and Brian Harsin and why they are the epitome of a toxic relationship. We're also going to get into the A&M and Arkansas thriller that your friends told you would be a good game, so they were right about that one. Going to give you our top four, and then at the end, like we mentioned, we're going to bring you into the party and answer some of your questions. Again, submit those right now. But at the top of this thing, we're going to talk about the marquee matchup. You had Florida going to Knoxville to a checkered Neyland Stadium to play the Tennessee Volunteers. It was a ranked matchup. It was beauty. I mean, in terms of the pageantry of college football, this had just about everything you could ask, think, or imagine in a game. Ultimately, Tennessee ended up winning the game 38-33, kind of staved off a pesky comeback effort from Florida. We're going to talk about both teams and some of our takeaways, but first of all, Tennessee, they were by no means perfect. By no means perfect, but they found a way to get it done. On top of that, they were not at full strength. They had their alpha dog wide receiver, Cedric Tillman, not playing in this game. You say, well, how big a deal is that? For those of you that know and love and watch Tennessee routinely, you know that is Hendon Hooker's safety blanket. Stuff breaks down, the play goes to the dogs, he's going to his dog, Cedric Tillman. All right, so to not have him in this game was a very big deal. So what does that mean? It means you had to have other guys step up. And step up they did. You had Brew McCoy have a day, over 100 yards receiving. A lot of people throughout the college football offseason were saying, okay, there has to be a wide receiver two that steps up for Tennessee, right? Got to be somebody else to carry the load. If Cedric Tillman isn't on that day, this was that day early in the year. And for Brew McCoy to put it together in the fashion that he did was something that we've waited for from a long time from Brew McCoy. So that was encouraging to see. But I think to zoom out a little bit more, elite programs, championship level programs are able to play at their best when they don't have all their talent available. Let me phrase that another way. It is one thing to want to compensate when someone goes down. I think just about every program in the country, unless you have a severe culture issue, you want to step up and be there for your brother when he's not playing. It is a whole nother thing to have the ability to have the talent within your roster to say, that's okay, we're still going to have another wide receiver step up and take the place of Cedric Tillman. That's a very big deal. That cannot be overstated. So for Tennessee going forward, if they can have Brew McCoy continue to play at this level, they can have Ramel Keaton continue to play at this level, and they get Cedric Tillman back, Tennessee's going to be a problem for a lot of people in this conference. On top of that, Hendon Hooker, they asked a lot more of him in the run game. Dude is a competitor. He said, yes, sir, give me the rock. Carried it for over 100 yards on the day. against a Florida front seven with that first string front seven for Florida, some bad dudes. Ventrell Miller, we didn't think he was going to play in this game, was a game time decision, got right, played in this game, and ultimately made an impact, at least getting Florida lined up. Now, Tennessee still went for 38 points, so that's a whole other conversation to have. But getting back to Hendon Hooker, sticking with this narrative or this thesis that, hey, what do elite programs have? They have guys step up. On top of that, elite programs are led by elite players. That's not to say elite programs just have elite players. A lot of programs across the country have elite players, but they're led by their elite players. And Hendon Hooker was the catalyst yesterday for Tennessee. You saw him go down, hurt the shoulder, bad wing, no problem, rub some dirt on it, we're good to go. It's a rivalry game. You kidding me? Hendon Hooker put himself in the Heisman Trophy conversation. Now, it's week 4. We're not going to get carried away here and give you our Heisman rankings on this show. We'll do that on TikTok. Don't get it twisted. I'm not here to lead the Hendon Hooker for Heisman campaign, but I am saying at Tennessee, you have a guy in Hendon Hooker, a guy who originally, when he got to Tennessee, he didn't win the starting job out of camp. It was Joe Milton. It took a few games until Hendon Hooker ultimately got the keys to the offense and hasn't looked back since. He's the guy at Tennessee. Even more so, he's the guy that can take you to where you want to go. I truly believe that. If Tennessee doesn't accomplish what they want to for the 2022 season, if they don't get to Atlanta, if they don't win the SEC, all of that, it will not be because of Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker proved yesterday in an emphatic fashion he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So that's great. You exercise a lot of those demons around the Florida rivalry, and hey, Florida had won 16 of the last 17. That's a huge deal, and it's a big thing that floated around on social media and graphics and whatever. Wasn't as big a deal to this team. But what does this mean for Tennessee? I begged the question all week long. If they do win this game, is it program defining? Is it a program defining win for Tennessee if they beat Florida and get that monkey off their back? Probably season defining to this point, which isn't saying a whole lot given how many games they've played. What I will say is this, though. This win can mean as much for Tennessee as they allow it to. What do I mean by that? If Tennessee comes off this bye week and they drop it to LSU, let's just say the worst case scenario happens and they just absolutely don't have it that day. Well, then this Florida game is probably a nice one to have rerunning back within the facility and probably fun to still recruit with. And it's a nice tool. It's a nice, silver bullet in your back pocket to have when it comes to you and Florida in the recruiting battle, whatever. If they can use this as a springboard forward and they continue to win and they continue to validate who they believe they are in that locker room, well, look out. On top of that, from the recruiting perspective, there was a lot of guys with a lot of stars next to their name in that stadium yesterday, probably wowed by Checker Nealon. On top of that, a lot of guys that are big-time recruits watching that game on television. Tennessee has garnered a lot of attention nationally from the media, yes, but on top of that, from recruits. This win can mean as much as they want it to. This brick is only going to be as valuable as the ones that they stack on top of it. But altogether, for Tennessee, what Josh Heupel said on his post-game interview on the field where he was just like, Rocky Top's back, let's go, that got me fired up. So no such thing as a bad win. Obviously, anytime you beat your rival, it's a great win. But for Tennessee, there's a lot of things in front of them. They've now earned the opportunity to play some meaningful games in October and November and to do some really exciting things beyond that. Let's talk about Florida. What did we learn yesterday? Well, I think they proved yet again they got some dogs. Talent will not be the issue at Florida. It just likely will never really be the issue when it comes to games like this. AR, we said all week they got to let him cook. He was cooking. He was absolutely cooking. Accounted for 4 touchdowns, had that 1 interception. It's a garbage interception. I don't really want to talk about that. The Florida offense had nearly 600 yards of total offense. So the offense was humming. Here's what I think it comes down to for Florida. They have a lot of want to. A lot of want to, which is saying something. A lot of teams talk like they want to, but Florida has now proven on multiple occasions with the way they showed up against Tennessee, fighting until the last second, and the way they beat Utah, they have guys that care about the right things. They have guys that have their head on straight, AR being one of them. They have a lot of horsepower. We just talked about it. Talent's not an issue. They had 2 wide receivers go for over 100 yards yesterday. Ricky Pearsall, shorter. They got guys that can burn on the outside. That running back room, stocked. That defense, really good, especially on the front end. On the front end of that roster even. I mean, they're probably a few classes away from competing for what they really want to compete for, but they got guys. They got talent. The issue for Florida right now is knowing the how to. They're going to get there. It's Billy Napier's first year. They're going to be good enough to roll the ball out and play and beat some of these teams just based off having AR going that day and based off of the talent they have on that program. The how to is the next step for Florida. Can you not be having your day-to-day dictated by who's across from you? We talk about it all the time. You can't go and beat Utah and then not bring it against Kentucky. You can't go and beat a Utah team and then struggle with the USF team. It's got to be the same thing day in and day out. And that's something you grow into. As a program, as a culture, as a locker room, that takes some time to bake. But there's a lot of good things in place at Florida. You have nothing to hang your head about. Gave a really good Tennessee team all they could handle and then some at their crib in a raucous environment. Florida's going to be okay. Billy Napier, I still believe, is the right guy. The how-to is what's still being developed. Again, Tennessee wins that game 38-33 in checkered Neyland. That was a whole lot of fun to watch. We knew a lot of people at that game, and just talking to them afterwards, talking about the environment, they said it's like nothing else that I've ever been a part of. I have some friends that go to Tennessee, and they were just saying how it was one of the best games of their college experience or of their media experience, whatever it is. Checkered Neyland, in my opinion, is one of the 7 wonders of the college football world. What do we got in here? 48 viewers currently. If you're watching this video, just hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything. It helps us to do more of what you want to see. So go ahead and click that little subscribe button, and the party will keep rolling for both of us. We got to talk about Oklahoma. Lost a game in Norman last night, 41-34 to Kansas State. We're going to dig really deep into the Oklahoma side of things here in a second, but I want to just make sure we mention how impressive of a showing that was from Kansas State. We previewed this game. We didn't think Oklahoma would cover that 13.5. We did not think Kansas State was going to win that game. I'll just be straight up with you. We didn't see that happening. But the matchup that Kansas State presented in the line of scrimmage was extremely impressive. Chris Kleiman has that program playing their style of football, their brand of football. I was really impressed with what they brought to the table. Deuce Vaughn, 5'6", one of the toughest guys in the country. I don't care what position you're playing. Leads the Big 12 in rushing, leads the Big 12 in rushing for a reason. Adrian Martinez, the Nebraska transfer. I don't care who you support. You may even be an Oklahoma fan, so this might land a little bit weird with you. But you can't help but feel just a little bit happy for Adrian Martinez. After all that he went through from his time at Nebraska, to come out and have a game like this, to really, it feels like reached his potential last night, you just feel good for the guy. Now, what will Kansas State be the rest of the way? That's why they play the games. But they've proven they've got a lot under the hood to do some really good things. We're not going to go too much more into the Kansas State side because I think there's more to learn about Oklahoma. But for Kansas State, they showed they're going to be a problem in that Big 12 conference. Will they win it? I don't know. Will they ruin somebody else's chances to win it? You better believe it. They are not done playing spoiler. I think they want to play a little bit more than spoiler throughout the rest of the year. So let's talk about Oklahoma. Brent Venables obviously distraught in the post-game press conference, but I think we need to make sure that we get this out in the open. Everything that Oklahoma wants to do from a long-term perspective is still in front of them. The goals for them are win the Big 12, play for the college football playoff, play for a national championship. The way that the committee has proven they work, they would likely weight this loss more against them if it happened in November. Happened the last week of September. Do you ever want to lose a game? Of course not. But everything Oklahoma wants to do is still in front of them. That's first and foremost. Second, This wasn't a meltdown team-wide. We're not going to throw shade at Miami, but just use them as an example. Middle Tennessee pretty much did what they wanted against Miami. I mean, on both sides of the ball, Miami has issues. Oklahoma last night played well enough to win on offense. Dylan Gabriel, no interceptions, 4 touchdowns, over 300 yards, ran the offense like a boss. Eric Gray, over 100 yards on the ground. Oklahoma has the offense to be really, really good. Now, defensively, goes without saying, didn't play well enough. Gave up 275 yards on the ground. I don't care how many points you score. It's hard to win a game when those are the yards on the ground you're giving up, folks. Just the way it is. It's hard to do anything from a game plan perspective to supplement that or to try and combat that. Just the way that the game works, folks. So here's my question for Oklahoma defensively. Brent Venables talked a lot about, hey, I was surprised by our defense's performance because I've seen them be much better in those situations. We didn't execute the game plan. Obviously, didn't execute the game plan. But is it a tweak here and there, like a leaky faucet where, hey, we just got to tighten up a few screws, make a couple adjustments, and we're good to go? Football's funny that way. A little can go a long way in a game plan and a scheme perspective. That could very well be the case. Where you run into trouble for Oklahoma is if it's not about game plan, it's about the dudes you got on the field. If you legitimately just can't win your one-on-one matchups in the trenches at that second level, if that's the issue, well, then Oklahoma is at a different place than I think a lot of us thought they were. So the verdict is still out on this defense. Offense has been what we thought it would be, but the defense, clearly, you need more from. Is it an adjustment, or is it a personnel issue? Something to watch for in the future for Oklahoma. I'll end it with this. This is a fork-in-the-road moment for this Oklahoma program. It just is. You now have the opportunity to learn from this and get better and run the table the rest of the way? Or do you let this one loss turn into 2 losses, 3 losses, and you kind of get off the rails? I would imagine that this Brent Venables coach team has a strong enough culture in place to where they're going to respond in a positive way. But let me point to the 2017-2018 Oklahoma team. First week of October, Iowa State hands them an L, 38-31. This is a team with Baker Mayfield playing quarterback. One of the best to come through there. What happened then? Oklahoma, they talk about that being the best thing that happened to them that season because they responded, they took that fork in the road, ended up winning the Big 12, playing for a college football playoff. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with this team, but I am saying it's not off the table. Just about everything in life is how you respond. So for Oklahoma, how do you respond? 41-34, Kansas State came into Norman and won that game. We're going to see about the Sooners now. We're going to see the stress test now after a loss. When you get squeezed a little bit, what comes out? I'm looking forward to finding out about Oklahoma here very, very soon. Speaking of another Big 12 team that's headed to the SEC very, very soon, Texas went to Lubbock yesterday, also got an L. 34-37. The Red Raiders found a way to get it done, and this felt like Texas of old. And when I say of old, Texas of like last year. Because Texas really had Texas Tech on the ropes late in the third quarter, up a comfortable margin, had the chance to, I think, really put it away. But what did we see? Texas Tech, pesky, find a way to force overtime. In the first overtime, Bijan Robinson puts the ball on the carpet. Texas Tech kicks a game winner. Stormy conditions in Lubbock. And for Texas, as a Texas fan, you're saying, oh boy. Okay, this is how it's going to be in 2022. I thought we just did this drill. What's going on? It's not all for naught, okay? Similar to Oklahoma, there's a fork in the road. I would imagine the percentage of the fan base that isn't saying, oh my gosh, we're doing this again. You're saying, well, actually, Quinn Ewers comes back soon, so we're going to be okay. Hey, you all saw the mullet. You all saw him against the Crimson Tide. He was dealing. We're going to be okay. We just got to hang on tight till he gets back. Hudson Card wasn't the reason you lost the game yesterday. Threw 1 interception, had 2 touchdowns, was reasonably efficient with the football. The offense wasn't the reason you really lost the game yesterday. So I would protest with that. On top of that, this is really the point in time where I think we find out a whole lot about Texas, because that defense that we saw against Alabama was nowhere to be found against Texas Tech yesterday. So that tells me, okay, you get your gameplay dictated by who's across from you. Might get one Texas one day, the other Texas the next. If you're allowing 37 points, it may not matter as much if Quinn Ewers is playing quarterback for you. That sounds harsh, but I'm just being real. Even more so, let's say Quinn Ewers gets back sooner than expected. They play West Virginia, then play Oklahoma, you got Iowa State, then you go Oklahoma State. Let's say Quinn Ewers comes back after Oklahoma. Now, he may be back a lot sooner than that. I think his progress has been extremely quick, and he was actually suited up yesterday. Let's say he comes back after Oklahoma. What kind of situation is he coming back to? Not just from a wins and losses perspective. You could be 3-3, you could be 2-4, you could be 4-2. I'm not really here to talk about that. From a locker room perspective, where's the psyche of this Texas football team when he gets back? Because a quarterback is great. A quarterback is the key ingredient to being successful from an X's and O's standpoint, allows you to do a lot of great things. They had a pretty good quarterback last year in Casey Thompson. In my opinion, that might be a hot take with some of the Texas folks, but they had a quarterback that was good enough to win. And we saw them against Oklahoma take them to the limit. A lot of people would tell you, if Caleb Williams doesn't check into that game, Texas probably wins. Maybe Casey Thompson's still there. From that Oklahoma game, we were all saying the same thing about Texas after the Alabama game. Never want to lose, but hey, they looked good. They're going to be okay. If they can play like that the rest of the way, they're going to be all right. Texas just slowly but surely drifted off the rails. You point to culture. You point to culture. That's not, you don't drop that many games in a row after playing as well as you did against Oklahoma because you just don't have it in the cupboard, because you don't have it under the hood. That's not the way this works. It's not like you go out there and you just have the exact same performance as you did the week before. Playing a team close doesn't allow you to win more games in the future. That's why they play the games every single Saturday. Every week you get a new one. The point I'm making is this. This is the stress test now for Texas. This is where we find out the integrity of this program. What's really under the hood? Because there was a lot of talk all offseason about revamping the culture. Hey, getting the bad culture out, bringing the new culture in. Bo Davis and his famous rant on that bus. A lot of guys hit the portal. A lot of guys came in through the portal. This is where we find out the ROI on that. This is where we test it's a hard word to say, the legitimacy of that talking. Texas, much like some of these other programs we've talked about from Scary Saturday, they're being squeezed. What do they look like when they get Quinn Ewers back? Is he in a position where everyone's mind is right, everyone's still bought in, main thing's the main thing, Quinn Ewers, you're back at quarterback, let's roll? Or is it, I'm playing for me, I'm going to get mines, that's how this is going to go? People pointing fingers, bad culture, toxic culture. If it's a toxic culture and Quinn Ewers is playing quarterback for you, doesn't really matter. That's the fact of the matter. So again, Texas goes to Lubbock and drops a tough game to the Red Raiders in Lubbock, 34-37. Joey McGuire after the game said, hey, I told you they were going to break, didn't I? I told you they were going to break. Joey McGuire is one of my favorite coaches in college football. But if I'm a Texas fan hearing that, that stings. That stings, and I take that pretty personal. Something to keep an eye on going forward. A team that barely survived Scary Hour Saturday was Clemson. They beat Wake Forest 51-45 in double OT. They went to Wake, got out of there with a W, and Clemson said it all week. They have the belt. They have the Atlantic belt. We want that back. So Dabo continuing to preach, little old Clemson. No one's giving us a shot. No one thinks we're any good. They find a way to get it done. We're going to unpack more so what this means for Clemson. Wake Forest played a phenomenal game, but Clemson, I think, is the real story here because the entire narrative around Clemson going into this season was, hey, that defense is good. That defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. Can the quarterback be good enough? I don't know. Might be Cade Klubnik by game 4. What happened in this game? We'll start with the defense. Defense struggled, which sounds fairly obvious. We're going to go into that a little bit more. Gave up 45 points. Sam Hartman was dealing like he was at a blackjack table, just passing out touchdown passes. Threw for 6. That was a school record. He was on. The concerning thing for me is the back end of this defense was playing man the majority of the game. And every single time it felt like Sam Hartman went deep, it was either just a Moss on your head top kind of catch, or it was a pass interference against Clemson. I know they're younger. I know they're beat up back there. But Clemson was very fortunate to win this game given the secondary play that they did. On top of that, the front seven wasn't really getting home. And that was one of the key variables we were watching going into this game. That was a hinge point for us. Wake Forest loves to do that sort of slow RPO, take their time. Those freak shows up front for Clemson, they got a lot of them. They're going to get home a fair amount, right? Well, not really. They sacked them twice, but that ultimately felt like a non-issue for the majority of the game for Wake Forest. They weren't really looking all that concerned about the pass rush. So the defense has got to take a look in the mirror. I don't pretend to know the exact schematics of what Clemson's trying to do defensively, but I did see a lot of man coverage, and I was seeing a lot of man-to-man matchups being lost. Does that look different next week? For Clemson's sake, you sure hope so, because they got NC State next week with the eyes of the country on them. So that's going to be something to watch. But let's talk about the good for Clemson, right? Because the narrative was kind of reversed. Defense is going to be great. Offense is going to be, can they be good enough, was what we all said. Can they be good enough to win some games? Well, DJ Uiagalelei, I promise you, even though he's got that Beats NIL deal, he still heard all that talk. Big Cinco is just sort of buying his time this offseason, just waiting for his chance to pop and play in a game. And to be fair, up to this point, he hadn't really been outstanding. He hadn't thrown for over 300 yards. He had been relatively efficient. He had been, for the most part, pedestrian. I cannot stress this enough. For those of you that think Cade Klubnik is the best option for Clemson going forward, he's the future at Clemson. But yesterday, if Cade Klubnik is the quarterback, you don't win that game. DJ Uiagalelei took over. He absolutely took over. Threw 5 touchdown passes, 371 yards. Probably the most impressive play to me of the day was that 2-point conversion where he throws off one leg. He's got another grown man just grabbing his ankle as he's getting the pass off. There's a 2-point conversion. DJ Uiagalelei, his maturity and his presence in the pocket was really impressive yesterday, and that willed Clemson forward. On top of that, the length of this receiving corps from Clemson. They showed up in a big way yesterday because we've all talked about this Clemson receiving corps not necessarily having somebody to take the top off the defense, not having that burner. Didn't matter yesterday. Found a way to get it done. The defense was down. The offense picked them up. It's the mark of a great team. Now, I'd be remiss if I don't mention Will Shipley, who is a certified dog. Over 100 yards rushing, added a lot of balance to that offense, allowed DJ Uiagalelei to do what he ended up doing. But we need to start taking Clemson a little bit more seriously, because there's a couple of things elite teams do. We talked about it with Tennessee, but talking about Clemson, they found a way to win when the strength of their team wasn't their strength. When that defense wasn't playing like how we all expect them to, they still found a way to win the game. Now, here's my question. Defensively, is that who you are? Is that going to be who you are the rest of the way, where you can't play man-to-man coverage, and if we want to go deep on you, we can? Because they got some pretty good quarterback and wide receivers they got to play the rest of the way. They got to play Florida State's Johnny Wilson, who feels like he's 8 feet tall. Promise he'll give you issues in man-to-man if you don't want to play better. Devin Leary for NC State, you got him next week. You don't shore up the secondary, you're going to have problems. So for Clemson, is this who they are? Maybe they're just a step slower on the back end, and if the front seven doesn't get there, oh, well, we got issues? Or is this a game where, hey, we just didn't have it that day, went on the road, got out of there with a win. Win ugly. Another thing that great teams do. Because I promise they're going to get tested the rest of the way. And DJ Uiagalelei, yes, won the game yesterday. He willed them to win that game yesterday. I don't think this is the formula you want to play with going forward. I don't think you want to ask him to throw for 5 touchdowns and over 350 yards. Because if that's how you live and die, it's going to be an on and off again season. And that's more pressure than you want to put on DJ. I'll finish with this. Talking about DJ, there is so much expectation around him to step into the shoes that those previous guys at Clemson had. Talking about Taj Boyd, talking about Trevor Lawrence. That's what you're used to when you watch Clemson football. That's not who DJ is. Was he that way yesterday? Oh, yeah. He can be that now and then, but they're not going to ask him to be 5-6 touchdown DJ. They're going to say, hey, get the ball to your playmakers, make the right read, don't turn the ball over, make plays with your legs. You're a big dude, big Cinco, go make big things happen, okay, in key moments. So I think the sentiment for Clemson is you found a way to win without your fastball, and you will always take a win, but you want to have your fastball more often than not. They better have it because they've got some really good passing combos coming into Clemson and going on the road for Clemson. So we're going to keep an eye on this, but overall, they win a thriller in double OT, 51-45. The Tigers get it done. All right, it's that time again. Nick, we have 86 concurrent viewers. If you're watching this, 1, thank you. 2, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're already watching. It's a really simple button to push. Just quick click. It helps us do more of what you want to see ultimately. It's a channel, yes. I like to say even more so, this is like a community. You are more than likely, if you're watching this show at 6 whatever Central Time on a Sunday night, you're probably a college football diehard. We're one and the same. Let's team up, subscribe to the channel, comment what you want to see more of, and we'll try and incorporate it. Also, quick call to action since we're doing this right now. If you have a question, get it in now. We're going to answer those at the end of the show. We would not be the People Show if we didn't incorporate the people. And we have a segment on the show at the end of the show fully dedicated to the people. All right? So go ahead and get those questions in now so we can answer them. This is a tough one to talk about, but we're going to do it anyway. We got to check in on Bryan Harsin and Auburn. They beat Missouri against all odds, 17-14. Missouri pretty much gift-wrapped that game to them multiple times. And we could go into depth on this game. Robbie Ashford looked solid in the early going, and then the offense, I mean, you scored 17 points, so I don't think there's too much digging we need to do there. Bryan Harsin and Auburn are the epitome of a toxic relationship. Legitimately. I'm not going to do the whole Webster's dictionary defines it as this, but there were some synonyms that go along with toxic relationships. Tell me if this sounds like something you've associated with Auburn. Unsupported, demeaned, attacked. That's 3 for 3 for those you keeping track at home. Bryan Harsin, unless you've been living under a rock, you know they more or less tried to fire him this past offseason. Credit to Bryan Harsin. They missed. He's still the head coach. He's still doing his best. His team is still, to my understanding, bought in for the most part, even after a tough loss to Penn State. Find a way to beat Missouri in miracle in Jordan Hare kind of fashion. Excuse me, miracle in Jordan Hare kind of fashion. Caught ourselves there. Bruce Feldman, who is an extremely reliable source within the college football world, he reported before this game, if Auburn had lost this game, they were ready to fire him as soon as Sunday, so today. If Auburn loses that game to Missouri, if Pete gets in the end zone, we might be having a conversation about how Bryan Harsin isn't the head coach at Auburn anymore. It feels like the writing is even more than on the wall. It feels inevitable. He will be fired as the head coach at Auburn, which we don't necessarily think is fair, but that's the way life goes. This is toxic. This isn't helping anybody. If you're Auburn, you've got a head coach that you don't want there. If you're Bryan Harsin, you're somewhere you're not wanted. You're not being supported. You've been attacked in the offseason. You've been demeaned by this administration or / booster program, whatever you want to call it, the powers that be at Auburn. Help me understand this. If you're going to fire him after a loss to Missouri, let that man walk. I mean, I understand that Bryan Harsin is going to fight tooth and nail for this job and going to fight till the bitter end, and that's why we support him on this program. That's why I think he's made of the right stuff that Auburn ultimately needs in the long term. But if you're going to fire him after a loss to Missouri during week 4 of the college football season, pay that man his 15 M's and let him go be an analyst at Bama. Like, let him get on with his life. On top of that, like I said, this is wasting everybody's time. This is hurting everybody involved because Bryan Harsin is wasting time. He could be probably spending with his family or getting ready for his next job, whatever it may be. For Auburn, I don't know if we are giving enough attention to how bad this really looks for them. If I'm a coach waiting to take a head coaching job, or I'm a head coach that could be looking elsewhere after whatever happens with our season, you're going to tell me that the Auburn job looks attractive after the way they've treated Brian Harsin? You're going to tell me I'm supposed to believe that Auburn is going to be a spot I want to go if I believe I have the chops to be a head coach at the Power 5 level? I don't think so. I wouldn't want to take it. That's not to knock Auburn as a program. We support Auburn as a program, but the way this thing is shaken out, it's toxic. On top of that, they're struggling to recruit because people are not sure who the head coach is going to be. They're chopping their own legs out from under them. This is a toxic relationship. It's bad for both parties. If you're going to fire him, but quit dragging this on. We all know where this thing is headed. Cut ties. Someone needs to step up here and do that. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it's a very unfortunate and unsettling and really just an ugly reality for everybody involved. So we hope they get that straightened out, but that's the nature of the beast right now as it pertains to everything around Jordan-Hare Stadium. Our last reaction of the show, Texas A&M, the Cardiac Kids, found a way to win one in Jerry World, 23-21 over the Arkansas Razorbacks. This game was a thriller, folks. If you didn't watch this game, that's on you, because even your friends who don't really like college football, who aren't really lifers like you and I, they even told you, I would actually watch that game. That's a game I want to make sure I'm tuned in for. So if you didn't watch it, don't beat yourself up, but let's just make sure we're on the ball next time. The turning point in this game was Arkansas going in to score, to take a commanding lead, to go up 21-7. KJ Jefferson says, "Soldier Boy, Superman," that you reaches out the ball gets loose, and then A&M runs it 16 yards, turns around, laterals to Damani Richardson. He takes it to the crib, and I wasn't there, obviously. I was in my living room watching this, but Jerry World, the A&M folks in attendance, had that place on fire. And that was the swing that ultimately, I think, really allowed A&M to win that game. Offensively, kind of the same song, second verse from a week ago. Devon Achane is a stud, continues to be the catalyst for that offense. Max Johnson, you said it before, they just look so much more competent offensively. They just look like they have a direction. They look more composed, and they ultimately played well enough to win that game. Now, in the same token, Arkansas couldn't get out of their own way. From a stat sheet perspective, probably played well enough to win, but I have a friend of mine who is a Texas A&M fan. I texted him after that field goal went off, not just the side of the upright, the top of the upright. Said, look, Jesus must be an Aggie. That's just the way that play shakes out, and that's the impression I get from that game. So ultimately, Arkansas can't get out of their own way, but let's take a few steps back, as we always do on Sunday. What does this game mean for both teams? Well, for A&M, they look good when they're desperate. I mean, think about it. After the loss to App State, after Max Johnson takes over the reins at quarterback, we have seen a very different Texas A&M football team. They played worlds better on offense, offensively, they looked worlds more competent. 23 points, nothing to write home about, but Jimbo Fisher in his postgame press conference talked a lot about how this team is maturing and progressing. They got a lot of youth. They do. Now, it looks like they'll have to be without Aniyah Smith, which is absolutely heartbreaking. You hope he's okay and is able to ultimately get back on the field at some point in time, whether it's this year or in the future. Bright future in front of him on the gridiron regardless, but they're going to have to count on some of these young guys. Evan Stewart played well last night. They're going to need him to step up big. They're going to need some of these young guys to kind of come more and more into their own. Because it was interesting the way that Jimbo Fisher phrased it. He said, we're just, we're not executing, but it's because we're nervous. Like, we have guys here that are doing this for one of the first times in their career. We don't have that experience yet to really just look down the barrel of the gun and be able to play confident from the first snap. It's not a matter of focus or culture or whatever. I mean, maybe some of those things play a part, but for us, it's about getting more mature, about us progressing as a program from an experience standpoint. So I thought that was intriguing. The worry I have for A&M is that now they've won a couple games and they're back to feeling comfortable. Because comfortable in the college football world, as yesterday will teach you, is a dangerous place to be. When you're comfortable, you take a little nibble of that rat poison, as Nick Saban likes to say. That's when you're vulnerable. We saw a lot of comfortable teams yesterday take a dive, take an L. A lot of comfortable teams get pushed. So for A&M, can you allow this game to mean more? Can you allow it to be that catalyst for you going forward, similar to Tennessee? This win, these last 2 wins, can mean as much to A&M as they allow them to. Now, if they play Mississippi State throws it all over the yard, well, then those conversations heat back up of what's Jimbo doing on offense? What's going on this defense? Hey, why can't they get it figured out? You're going to hear those conversations again. But to get a win against a good Arkansas team, a really good Arkansas team, a team that we thought would win the game outright, a very solid and encouraging win, a validating win for a lot of A&M fans and an A&M locker room, I'm sure, to beat a team like that, a team as highly ranked as they were. For Arkansas, it's kind of the same sentiment. You played well enough to win in a lot of facets, but you couldn't get out of your own way at the end. And they don't have time to hang their head because guess what? They got Alabama coming to town next week. Nick Saban's Alabama, the GOAT. Also, they got Bryce Young playing quarterback. Like, we're not here to break down Alabama, but it doesn't need to be stated how important that game is for this Arkansas program. You wonder if maybe they had a slight look ahead, and that's why they had the performance they did. But if they beat Alabama next week, I'll say it on this program, if they beat Alabama next week, they'll be looking at this A&M game and saying, gosh, dang it. Darn it. We have everything in front of us that we want, and we lost to A&M. At the same time, they may look back at this game and say, we needed that. We needed that to get our focus back right. So Arkansas, to me, is dangerous, actually. I think potentially even more dangerous than if they had beat A&M. So both programs at an interesting point in their season, but again, A&M wins this game 23-21. That was an amazing field goal try. I had never seen anything like that off the top of the upright. Aggies win in Jerry World. If you haven't yet subscribe to the channel. I think that was pretty good, Nick. You good with that? Yeah. We'll roll. So, after 4 weeks of the college football season, we're going to give you our top 4 teams and our first 2 out. The college football playoff has not started today, but if it did start today, we're going to give you our list of teams that we would pick. Now, there's a lot of people on Twitter saying this is too early. We don't care. The committee is going to give you their rankings later. We feel like we have a good gauge for this right now, so we're going to do it now. That's the way that we get down. Roll party. We're going to start with the first 2 out and work our way up. USC is our 6th team when it comes to this college football playoff race. Needed a little bit of extra help to beat an Oregon State team, but altogether, you're not mad at a win. You're never mad at a win. You went on the road and beat an Oregon State team that gave you just about all you could handle. Needed a little extra push from your offensive lineman if you're Caleb Williams to pick up that first down. You win ugly, but again, the real test for me, we're going to say it every time we talk about USC until we figure it out, when they go to Utah October 15th to play a program that's made up the way they are, that has the identity of the way that they do to play tough football, to run the ball, and if they just say, hey, Caleb Williams, you got to watch a lot of this game because we're going to just dictate our tempo to you with what we do running the football, can the USC defense get stops? They've been opportunistic multiple times throughout the year. They were opportunistic again last night. I still have the hesitation. I don't know if you can bank on turnovers week in and week out. You'll take them where you can get them, but to automatically think going into the game, yeah, we'll probably get 1, maybe 2 turnovers, that's not the way that football necessarily works. Again, take them where you can get them, but can they get stops against a tough Utah team remains to be seen. But credit to USC winning a low-scoring game last night against Oregon State in Corvallis. I was impressed. They're at number 6 for us in the college football playoff race. And number 5, Clemson moves up a spot from number 6 last week. Clemson, we already talked about them. We're going to see what happens when some of these other more, I don't want to say more dynamic, but some other equally dynamic playmakers line up across from them. You can do it 1 week, and when you get a win, you're happy with it. Obviously, you'd much rather figure out your weak spots during a win than a loss, but I worry about this Clemson secondary. The offense has shown that they can answer the call to action, But the secondary cannot be overlooked because that was the strength of this team, right? That was what we were all talking about during the offseason. The Clemson defense is going to carry them. If the secondary can't hold up their end of the deal, I worry about them. Nonetheless, a win's a win. They're at number 5 for us in the college football playoff race. Let's move into the top 4 now. Michigan is our number 4 team. They beat Maryland last week, or excuse me, I guess this week not against all odds, but you hear what I'm saying here. They beat Maryland in a really, I don't want to say ugly game, but Michigan really got all they could handle from Maryland. In the early going, Maryland was throwing haymakers, and they were landing them. J.J. McCarthy, to me, I know Blake Corum ran for like 240-plus yards, absolute man-child. J.J. McCarthy, having him in the game, allowed for some of those runs that Blake Corum had. By nature of the defense having to worry about number 9 tucking and running the ball, that allowed for some gaps that wouldn't otherwise be there with J.J. McCarthy, with Cade McNamara in the game. That's the fact of the matter. So they got tested against a Power 5 Big Ten opponent. Didn't look as dominant. The scoreboard probably looks a little bit better than the actual game was. But nonetheless, like we said, a win is a win. Michigan finds a way to get it done against Maryland at home. Michigan's going to be tested by other more formidable competition. But as long as they continue to incrementally improve each week, I think they'll be okay. We'll find out a lot about them, obviously, the last game of the year when they play Ohio State. Expect that to mean quite a bit. Our number 3 team is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Same as last week. They beat Vanderbilt. This is all going to come out in the wash. I think Alabama is going to have a chance to really make a statement this coming week against Arkansas. They're just chugging along, right? They're just sort of flying under the radar, which is sort of a new thing for Alabama, honestly, because we're so used to crowning them as the national champion by week 3, it seems like. They're sort of chugging along, and I think Nick Saban likes it that way. For us, they're at number 3. At number 2, we got Ohio State. Beat Wisconsin in emphatic fashion in the all-black uniforms. The all-black uniforms, side note, should be the standard for alternate uniforms in the college football landscape. I loved that. Marvin Harrison Jr. with the Apple Watch, counting his steps, Louis Vuitton cleats, whatever. They take care of business, did nothing to deter us from dropping them, or excuse me, to changing their status, if that makes sense. C.J. Stroud is a dog. There's just more that we're going to find out about this team. But for them to beat a good Wisconsin team, or at least a more competitive Wisconsin team than you would have had in a Toledo team, I think you're encouraged. I don't know if you learned anything new, but they're number 2 for us when it comes to our college football playoff race. At number 1, we might get some pushback on this. We got the Georgia Bulldogs. To say they had trouble with Kent State doesn't feel like the right verbiage to use. I think Kent State played better than a lot of us thought they would. And they're number 1 for us because of what we've seen thus far. We're not going to drop them after an unimpressive win over Kent State. They should have beat them by, the spread was 44.5. That tells you anything going into this game. But Georgia, I can't get out of my mind the way that they played Oregon in week 1. They've been dominant thus far. They didn't look dominant to the degree we wanted them to against Kent State. But to drop them after 1 week would feel short-sighted. Once they get into more competitive games, that's when I think we'll really have a chance to break down this top 3 with a little more depth. To me, I would just say Georgia didn't really look like they were super focused against Kent State. Like, let's call a spade here. You have 8 new starters on defense. Typically, a year ago, a game like this for those 8 starters means, hey, we're back up, so we're kind of just going through the motions this week. We'll get some PT when the game's out of hand, or maybe we rotate in. Regardless, we're going to take care of business. This was their first time against, let's just call it what it was, much lesser competition, where they had to still bring that same attitude. So are you concerned? Slightly. It is what it is. Georgia's going to be okay. They're still number 1 for us in our college football playoff rankings. So to recap, we got Georgia at 1, Ohio State at 2. We have Bama at 3, Michigan at number 4. Our first 2 out are Clemson at 5, and then USC at number 6. So a lot to unpack there. That's going to obviously change the rest of the year. Some of these teams are going to play each other, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. But we're not waiting for these college football playoff committee people to try and get in a room and talk about it. We're doing it right here on air, the People Show, together, all right? Now, it has been long awaited. The debut of the best producer in the game, and it's not even close. Nick, Heavy Lifter Break, welcome to the program.
Hey, JD, I appreciate it, man. It kind of feels like Han Solo when he came out of Carbonite. But nevertheless, it's great to be here. Like JD said earlier in the show, send in your questions in the chat. We'll read them off. JD, do you want me to start?
Let's do it. Let's get right into it. I appreciate you sort of being the keeper of the chat. I'm excited to get into this.
Oh, yeah. I've been reading them all hour, I guess. So we'll start with Ray Anderson. He says he wants to know the thoughts on Utah football. He wants to know their college football chances, or the playoff chances, excuse me. Can they repeat as Pac-12 champs? And he wants to know how they fit with conference realignment. So kind of a broad question.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Conference realignment is probably a conversation for later in the year. I think whatever Oregon does is going to kind of set the tone for the Pac-12. As far as their chances to repeat as Pac-12 champions, they're very much controlling their own destiny. Obviously, you drop a game to Florida at Florida. I think that probably hurts their college football playoff chances just a little bit, but I have that date circled with USC, October 15th. They come to town. I think that's going to be potentially the first round of the Pac-12 championship. We might see that same matchup at the end of the year in the Pac-12 championship. So they might have to beat a USC team twice, but ultimately I think that's really their competition, because Utah know who they are, play tough brand of football, got Cam Rising, who's as experienced as they come in terms of playing in big games for that program, and Kyle Whittingham has built a monster, as we like to say. So Utah, I think, is in good position. Excited to see what they do the rest of the way. What else we got, Big Nick?
Okay, so Nick Meyer, he seems to be a depressed Texas fan. He wants to know, why does Texas continue to let us down when we think they are so close to being, in quotes, back?
It's a great question. It's a very great question. And I'll say this. I feel for you, Nick. I feel for you. Great name, by the way. Nick Meyer, Nick Brake. I feel for you. Why do we get our expectations so high? I'll tell you this. It's not because of Texas. It's because of people like us that sit here with the mic and want to talk about the brand and want to relive the glory days and talk all about all the great things that Texas eventually was. Because you think about just everything that's around Texas. They're in the Big 12. They make a whole lot of money. They have a huge fan base. There is a lot of good things that come from being excited about Texas football. On top of that, they did some really good things in the transfer portal. Isaiah Nayor was supposed to be a guy for them this year. Quinn Ewers supposed to be a guy for them this year. Bijan Robinson, for a lot of people's money, the best running back in the country. Why do they continue to let us down? It feels sort of cliche to say, but it's culture, right? Every single week they have to bring it. You can't just play like you did against Alabama, only against Alabama. They've got good things under the hood, but right now we're going to learn a lot about them after this loss to Texas Tech. Quinn Ewers obviously is going to come back at some point in time, but what kind of situation is he coming back to? So very excited to see what that looks like for Texas going forward, because when Texas is playing great, I am under the impression that I think it's good for college football. I just do. When those big brands play well, I think it's fun. So they're excited for Arch Manning to get on campus here sooner rather than later, but a lot is still in front of this Texas program. Very curious to see how they respond after this upset loss in Lubbock. That was a good one, Nick. What else we got in the queue, big dog?
Okay, I'm not going to really try to say this name. It's a lot of random letters. But they asked, what do we think about Tennessee being up 3 scores and letting it get very close in the end?
It's a fair question. It's a fair concern. I would say, what do we think about it? We don't love it, obviously, but same thing that we talked about earlier in the program, Florida's got a lot of talent. It wasn't like they just led up to a program full of Joe Schmo. And credit to Florida for them to be able to claw back in this game and find a way to keep it competitive and never say die. They got a whole lot of fighters on that program. Now, for Tennessee, I think they are a further developed program than Florida is, but they still have a little bit of that how-to they're figuring out. It's still just year 2 under Josh Heupel. Now, will they get it corrected? For Tennessee's sake, I sure hope so. But with how much talent they have and all the guys they got offensively, I think there needs to be a little bit more of that killer instinct with, hey, we're up 3 scores. Let's try and go up 4 scores. It felt like maybe Tennessee was content to take their foot off the gas just ever so slightly. But we'll see. Tennessee's got a whole lot of great programs ahead of them. They still got to play Georgia, still got to play Bama, got to play LSU, got to play Kentucky. So we're going to get a fair verdict on Tennessee. If Tennessee ends up playing in Atlanta, it won't be because they lucked into it with a soft schedule. But it's a fair concern. I think you got to take it one game at a time, which is the ultimate cliche. But Tennessee, a season-defining win to this point, it can mean as much as they want it to going forward.
How's one more, JD?
Let's do it, Nick.
Okay,
I'm having a blast, brother.
Awesome. Okay, so Will Burton wants to know, how are we feeling? you in particular. I don't think he cares how I feel about it. But LSU and Auburn, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I hope they care about how you feel, Nick. I
Well,
care about how you feel. How are we feeling about LSU and Auburn? I mean, at the end of the day, I think you have one program going like this and one program going like this in terms of the longer play here. And I'll give you one guess which program's going like this. It ain't LSU. For Brian Harsin, I mean, credit to him and his program for still being bought in, it feels like. I mean, for them to win that game yesterday was nothing short of a miracle. For LSU, I'm really excited to see what they do the rest of the way because they got a lot of guys. Kayshon Boutte feels like still hasn't come into his own just yet. They just got John Emery back. I think he's going to be a guy for them down the stretch here. Jaden Daniels is doing a lot with his legs. The key for me for LSU is how much of a sense of urgency do they approach that Auburn game with? Because we've seen LSU has kind of just sleptwalked out of the gate a couple times offensively. If they want to do that and this Auburn team decides that they want to play through the whistle and play for their head coach, it could be anyone's game. That's the greatest part about college football. If you were just line it up and just have me pick a team today, it's hard to pick against LSU with all the commotion going on at Auburn. So how we feel about it, we strongly lean LSU, but the beauty of college football is any Saturday, anything can happen. So we'll be locked in, I guarantee you that, but we think LSU wins that game if we had to pick a team today. What do you think, Nick? We all out of the chat here, brother?
Yeah, not too much more.
Dude, how about the people got to see you? People got to see your face, man.
Yeah, hey, look, am I what they thought I was going to be? I hope I'm better.
You probably blew expectations out of the water. Not to say that we put the bar low, but the bar was up here, and I think you knocked it out of the park. So, Nick, appreciate you being the keeper of the queue. Folks, appreciate you tuning in the program. Every single week, like I said, we don't really script these things. We have a lot of notes, and we give you our thoughts in the most authentic way possible, and we want to incorporate you into the show as much as possible. We're going to keep doing this, okay? Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of these live shows, but we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep involving you in the chat and in the party section, as we like to call it. So continue to stay up with us. Continue to comment. Continue to tell us what you want to see. This is a community. That's what makes it fun. The people that make up college football is what makes this special. The passion, the fans, everything about it. That's what we love. So, again, appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel. Our last call to action, subscribe, because it helps us, obviously, but I think long run, it helps y'all get you what you want to see more of. We appreciate you. As always, we are going to keep the party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.